toy. Hurry, buy.
Bananas.
Mini Mario toy. It walks, it talks, it says.
Mamma mia.
Each one comes in its own crystal ball. Collect one, collect them all. Be the first one on your block to own the amazing new Mini Mario toy. Hurry before they're all sold out. Hurry, buy one, buy them all. Buy them all. Buy them all. Buy them all.
Well, Mario vs. Donkey Kong, we've met again, except this time on the Nintendo Switch. Hey, what's up ladies and gentlemen, it is I am the one and only Starlight Glimmer here, and I am from the likes of the Maxi Toys videos here. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll present to you our next new Let's Play for 2024, and this time we're going on to Mario vs. Donkey Kong, but this time on a Nintendo Switch remake. Now, as far as you probably already know, this game recently came out ever since in about a week ago, along the same time as the films of not only the Maxi Toys 13th anniversary, which it already exists anyway, but it's also worth noting for this game also came out around the same time as when the Super Smash Bros. Ultimate Sora Amiibo figure, which I think is actually a pretty cool coincidence back in the 16th of February. So as you probably already expect, technically we've already done Mario vs. Donkey Kong, but that was on the Game Boy Advance. So as a result, that thanks to Maxi did already tackle for that game back in during the films of in 2021, but here we are in 2024 that we're about to be tackling through the exact same game, except this time with a gorgeous visuals, and it's basically a remake based off from the Game Boy Advance classic. So because of this though, yeah, I'm really looking forward to doing this game for you guys, especially concerning for the fact that I always have a bit of a nostalgia memory when it comes to experiencing Mario vs. Donkey Kong in general, specifically the first game in the series, mainly because I have more super nostalgia memories for it. So, as you probably already expect about the fact that this game not only does it able to bring back the classic gameplay from the Game Boy Advance version, but it's also worth noting for is about the fact that, as you can tell, not only does it have its upgraded visuals, but it does manage to contain some new content. Like for instance, for example, there was actually two different difficulty options you can able to go through. Like you can either decide able to go on to casual mode or classic style. So as a result, yeah, as you can see on screen, that if you ever experience the classic mode, it plays pretty much like the forms of how it does in the original, whilst in casual mode, it allows you to able to have more bubbles, and also in addition to that, it gives you infinite amount of time. So for this particular playthrough, as we expected, we'll go for on classic mode, just because we feel likely up for the challenge, especially because we've already experienced the Game Boy Advance version already back in 2021. So with that being said, let's jump right into Mario vs. Donkey Kong for the Nintendo Switch.
Hey! Hey! Wait!
Well, it looks like Donkey Kong just somehow steals these bunch of mini Marios yet again, except this time with gorgeous visuals, and I will say, the actual presentation, not just by the forms of that particular cutscene, but also with the intro cutscene as well, are a lot more better this time around, because they are fully animated, so I can appreciate with the forms of how the fact that this particular version is a massive step up from the likes of the original counterparts. So, and speaking of which, we somehow immediately jump right into the first level, rather than just going to the level selection screen, unlike the original, so that's actually pretty swell. And of course, as you probably expect, Charles, who did a voice of Mario, he's back. So as a result, I very appreciate about that, despite the fact that most of those voice clips are basically reused from the previous Mario games, as be expected, when it comes to not only for certain spin-off Mario games, but also with the forms of some other games as well, potentially. So either way, so yeah, this is Mario vs. Donkey Kong for the Nintendo Switch remake. Again, if you ever experienced the Game Boy Advance original before, it plays very similar to the forms of how it does on the Game Boy Advance version, except you do realize there are some massive changes around here. For instance, aside from the visuals, there's also to the point where, as you can tell, there's no scoring system this time. So at the very least, we can able to expect getting these stars in this particular remake this time around is by getting all 3 of those different colored presents. So as a result, it makes things a little bit more easier than the forms of how it does in the original version, because you really cannot afford to die if you try to able to keep up with your point scores. But thankfully in this game this time around, you can die as many times you want to this time around, so potentially speaking, you can able to easily try to get the star very easily. And also, as you can see, unlike the original version of the game, that you have to only unlock 1 level at a time, in here though, you're able to actually access to almost every single levels in any of these worlds, except with the other 2, mainly because we can able to actually go all of those stages in a chronological order. That's exactly what I was going to be aiming for. And also, if you couldn't tell, there is actually a notification on top, which means this game does have 2-player support. So as a result, you can able to experience the game co-op, with not only one player can take control of Mario, but the other player can take control of Toad. Which I was originally trying to able to show this off, but maybe in the extra stuff of how this particular remake actually has to offer, then obviously we'll show this off and do it at some point. So, anyways though, so a few things we want to explain for this point today is that today's date, of course, is the 24th of February today, in some cases in 2024 today. It seems that we've actually come across into double of 24s all of a sudden. So because of that, with the 24th day and the 24th year for the 2000s kind of stuff. So even then though, it's kind of hard to explain about this honestly, because I already know for a fact it's been quite some time since I actually gone into the forms of some commentary recently. Although apart from the fact that for one noticeable thing I want to address something is that I do apologize with the forms of that particular point, that you remember the forms of in the last part of Sonic's story in Sonic the Hedgehog 2006. One thing that Maxi has totally forgot to mention about is that unfortunately though, similar to the forms of how it does it in our Let's Play of Sonic Frontiers, unfortunately though, the actual credits section in during the forms of that particular part is actually muted, if only because once again we've stumbled across into a copyright music. So because of that though, yeah, we have some very stupid luck with all these recent Sonic Let's Plays for the time. So I'm not exactly sure what's actually going to be the case, although I'm guessing it's most notably because he didn't seem to able to turn down the volume on the actual the game audio. Well, that seems to be the case, but still. Anyways, let's go and move on to level 1-3. So obviously, unlike the original version of the game, you can able to actually choose whatever levels you want to tackle through, which I guess that's a good thing, especially because obviously, no matter what though, you can play this game on the go, just like the forms of how it does on the Game Boy Advance version. Although the noticeable difference, as you can definitely tell, aside from the fact that, well, as I said before, there's no scoring system, so as a result, we can able to easily manage to breezily win through certain worlds in a quicker fashion. So because of this, unlike the original version of the game, that we obviously attempt to go for 1 world per video, this time around though, on the Switch remake, I am going to be participating by doing 2 worlds per video, because obviously I just want to show some different variety when it comes to pacing, and not only that though, is about the fact that we can easily manage able to beat certain stages in the fastest time if possible. And because of this, trying to deal with enemies is not so much of an issue this time around though, because obviously you don't have to worry about dealing with certain enemies and all that stuff, like these toy shy guys and stuff like that. So yeah, that maybe seems to be the case here. So, and obviously this particular remake did first announce back in September 2023, and thanks to the forms of one of those Nintendo leakers called Pyro, basically he did somehow address with that specific GIF that it actually shows a brief clip of Donkey Kong performs a bit of a roll attack in the Super Mario Bros. Movie clip. That actually signifies about the fact that after that particular Super Mario Bros. Movie success, you know, with the most recent one, not the old one, mind you, because as a result, whenever I first saw this announced, during the films up in the September 2023, Nintendo Direct, alongside with the films of not only Princess Peach Showtime, but also with the films of Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door Remake. And I gotta say, I was super hyped about the films of this particular remake of Mario vs. Donkey Kong because, relatively speaking though, do you guys even remember back in 2016 that after the release of the films of Mini Mario and Friends Amiibo Challenge, despite the fact that it does not say Mario vs. Donkey Kong on that title, and by the way, that particular title of Amiibo Challenge is for free back then, even though despite the fact that you can no longer get that game anymore, because obviously the Nintendo eShop application is dead. So, yeah, you probably get the idea for this point. Usually back in 2016, that the Mario vs. Donkey Kong series was actually in a bit of a hiatus when it comes to likely not bringing new games for the time being, but it wasn't until in 2024 roll around that we finally get able to notice that the series has returned, but in the forms within the first game as a remake. So, I always appreciate about that. So, anyways, there's another changes around here for the sake of this version of the game, is that you remember when you trying to keep on collecting those all three of those different colored presents, like every time when you finish the level, after when you do manage to able to collect all three of those different colored presents, you are always forced to able to go into one of those two bonus games, ranging from the stopping the arrow and shuffling around those presents while trying to avoid Donkey Kong's fists, and relatively speaking, that was about the fact that you can able to potentially trying to get extra lives from. Well, as devices say, is about the fact that it always happens every time back on the Game Boy Advance version. That's not the case this time around though on the Switch remake, because instead, it happens on rare occasions where basically the actual 1-up icon rarely shows up on the actual stage selection screen, and basically rather than just going into the forms of the exact same two bonus games as the forms of how it does on the Game Boy Advance version, so instead it's now being replaced as the bonus stage as a platforming department. So, yeah, basically on these platforming bonus stages, if you couldn't tell, that will pretty much guarantees us about the fact that in order to able to get even more extra lives onto its disposal, is that not only you can able to grab those extra lives on the fly, but it's also about the fact that you need to able to obtain the flying key, and once you obtain the flying key, obviously you need to make your way to the treasure chest, and that will grant you a, well, 5 extra life mushrooms. So, yeah, that was actually pretty swell, especially concerning for the fact that I'm obviously going to be showing up all of these stages once, by the way, just to ensure for the fact that I will try my best to able to actually grind as many of those extra lives as I could. So, relatively speaking of, that's what I can really say about this, I guess. So, and also you do realize about the fact that I was a little bit disappointed about the fact that there was a limited amount of Mario's voice lines in this remake compared to the forms of how it does on the Game Boy Advance version, because normally back in 2004, those Mario voice lines back then is actually very unique and funny. Like, for example, in that particular second cutscene, when Mario gets in contact with Donkey Kong, while Donkey Kong steals the Mini Marios, that Mario just goes like, "No you don't, no you don't." And that was actually pretty funny, including with the forms of Mamma Mia with the Italian gibberish. So, yeah, that's actually pretty hilarious back then. But it's a shame about the fact that the remake does not contain those voice clips this time around, though. I'm guessing they're trying to reuse the exact same voice clips from any other Mario spin-off games, I'm pretty sure. Like, I've already established that before. But either way, beggars can't be choosers, I guess. So, and relatively speaking though, there's also another one of those examples that Mario also has unique voice lines every time whenever you're entering a new world. Like, for example, the first world we're going to be jumped right into is Mario Toy Company. Usually on the Game Boy Advance version, that he just managed able to say this unique line, saying like, "Let's get it going," whilst compared to the forms of how it does on the Switch remake this time around, it's pretty standard, like, "Hey, stop, come back," kind of voice line, which even though, again, beggars can't be choosers, I guess, so either way. That's to be expected, much like the forms of how it does it in terms of the forms of gameplay in the forms of in a Switch remake of Mario vs. Donkey Kong. Not only plays out exactly like the Game Boy Advance version, but also with Donkey Kong 94 as well for the Game Boy. And generally speaking, notice that Mario can once again perform a handstand as well as the triple jump while doing with his acrobatic moves. And on top of that, with the forms of backflips, and relatively speaking, Mario is actually a little bit more acrobatic in Journey forms of not only in this game, but also on the Game Boy Advance original, and especially noticeable with Donkey Kong 94 as well. So generally speaking, that's the reason why I always prefer those gameplay styles like this when it comes to a Mario vs. Donkey Kong series. I mean, don't get me wrong, I don't mind the Lemmings kind of gameplay style from Mario vs. Donkey Kong 2 all the way up to Tipping Stars, but it's just about the fact that I'm not exactly a big fan when it comes to likely concentrate on multiple things at a time, so, but that's just me. So anyway, once we've done with all 6 of those regular stages, well, we've met again with the forms of those mini Mario types of stages, and suffice to say, they play pretty much exactly like the forms of how it does in the original counterparts, except there's one little thing you might able to realize. Once you jump into the actual level, usually, unlike the Game Boy Advance version, that it doesn't give you a brief tutorial clip this time around though, whilst in the forms of in the Game Boy Advance version, it does show you how the actual mechanics work, while in the remake though, that does not seem the case this time around, so... And as you can tell, in order to able to complete those mini Mario stages is about the fact that you once again have to collect all 3 of those letters that's spelled toy, so as a result we need to grab a T, O, and Y letters. So, and once you're done with that, the chest actually opens up, so just in case you can able to let those mini Marios go into that particular toy box, and as a result you can able to actually finish the level like so. And as a result, just like the Game Boy Advance original, basically though we need to gather around 6, or should I say all 6 of those mini Marios, so not only it actually converts into your health points or hit points, which once again we're able to fight against with Donkey Kong himself. So obviously that's the first boss is pretty simple. So basically though it's about the fact that once he decides able to activate those different colored switches, you have to quickly grab those one of those trash cans, and you can obviously toss the trash can right back at Donkey Kong and vice versa. So, and as be expected, each and every single bosses, that obviously that Donkey Kong has a grand total of 4 hit points. So relatively speaking though, as I said before, the first boss is really easy, especially concerning for the fact that you pretty much know exactly what to do for this point, and eventually at some point, that certain bosses might get a bit tough and difficult. Well, you see what I mean, whenever we get to the later weekends to come, so... And that was it, the forms of Mario Toy Company. Overall, it's a very easy world as far as this is concerned. I mean, nothing else to say about this, I guess. Oh, and by the way, something's worth noting for, there's also another type of stars that you can only obtain once you do realize about the fact that, well, I'll explain more details as soon as we get to the next world. So, relatively speaking though, speaking of the next world we're going to be jump right into is Donkey Kong Jungle. So, yeah, pretty standard stuff for the most part. So, but it wasn't until after we finish up with World 3, and say plus with World 5, things gets a little bit more interesting, which I'm sure you probably already noticed right from the start, so either way. Okay, quick edit right there, sorry about that, because I somehow managed to get in contact with Trixie, so either way. So, as you can tell, no matter what though, we've now entering onto a different page, so as a result, we're able to actually only press the L and R buttons to able to move on to the next world, just like the forms of how it does on the Game Boy Advance original, so, which, obviously, that's actually, kind of a cool thing, I suppose. So, oh, and also, during the forms of the actual, the stage selection screen, not only does it show you the forms of what style you're going to be playing on, but it's also about the fact that it actually shows you how much stars you've got, as well as how many extra lives you've accumulated. So, either way, let's just jump right into, you know, 2-1 in Donkey Kong Jungle. So, yeah, relatively speaking, it was about the fact that every time whenever you begin the new world, obviously we were able to see Donkey Kong just barely fit in that keyhole. So, relatively speaking, it was about the fact that you pretty much know what to expect. So, And obviously, we're now going to be coming across into climbing into certain ropes, just like the forms of how it does it on not only in Donkey Kong 94, but also in the original Game Boy Advance version, and also Donkey Kong Jr. So, oh, and speaking of Donkey Kong Jr. though, there's one thing I would classify for mentioning to you guys out there. We were expecting to be able to try to also play certain Donkey Kong games, you know, with the forms of the archaic experience with Donkey Kong, Donkey Kong Jr., and Donkey Kong 3. Well, I haven't exactly got around to those games just yet though, when it comes to doing Let's Plays just yet though, but maybe at some point, maybe later on though, but we shall definitely see what happens during the forms of the majority of 2024. Although, one thing to keep this in mind is about the fact that, like we've already established this before, about the fact that we are very excited about the forms of some aspects recently, about the fact no matter what though, as it turns out, for those of you who lived in Japan, on the forms of in that particular recent Nintendo Direct Partner Showcase, as it turns out, we're about to be getting, or they are about to be getting, a Mother 3 game onto the NSO expansion pack. Well, here's the catch though, it was once again Japanese exclusive, which I know for a fact that that game was not localized into any forms of any English versions of that game, so a lot of English fans out there are once again ticked off, especially concerning for the fact that in order to able to actually access to Mother 3 nowadays is either on the emulator, or you can try to able to actually now able to play the game on the forms of the actual NSO expansion pack if you do have the Japanese account. So, yeah, it's a little bit of nuisance though, because I almost assume they'll able to try to also feature that game everywhere else, so that way they can able to get a full experience of it with the entire trilogy of the actual Mother series, ranging from Mother 1, Mother 2, or in some cases Earthbound Beginnings and Earthbound for the Super Nintendo, and in addition with the forms of, well, Mother 3, or just anything else like that. But I don't know about you, but either way, speaking of which though, is about the fact that one thing that Maxi has totally forgot to mention about, during the course of the Sonic the Hedgehog 2006, by the ending conclusion of Sonic's story, as it turns out, is about the fact that not only does Epic Mickey Rebrushed is coming onto Nintendo Switch, as it turns out, it's going to be multi-platform, so as a result, it's very similar to the forms of how it does it in Epic Mickey 2, The Power of Two, except this time around though it's a full-on remake of the first game, and it's usually been made by not only a different publisher, but also a different developer as well. So generally speaking though, it's actually still very surprising that two of those developers in particular, not only THQ, but also with Purple Lamp Studios, who actually worked on that particular Epic Mickey remake, that also did, you know, SpongeBob SquarePants Battle for Bikini Bottom Rehydrated. So, still very surprised about that, which I honestly don't mind about this at all. And still, once that particular remake comes out, specifically on the Nintendo Switch version, so thankfully we can able to give that game another chance, but this time on the gorgeous HD visuals, at least specifically on the Switch version, mind you. So as a result, no matter what though, we at the very least we don't need to worry about this stupid nunchuck issue for its connection issues. So anyways, I love performing quicker shortcuts like this, especially concerning for the fact that we've met again with this yellow bird in particular. Now, here's the catch with this yellow bird this time around though in this remake, is that normally in the original game, you can't do anything with it, because obviously he will still hurt you if you try to jump onto him, or in some cases when the bird decides to drop the actual egg, and if you dare touch the egg, you will die automatically. Unless if you do manage to realize on the remake, you can now able to actually kill that particular yellow bird this time around by simply jump onto him. And relatively speaking though, since he's now decided able to drop yellow eggs, and if you try to able to perform a handstand, you can actually able to block that this time around, or protect yourself with it this time around. So, although I haven't exactly tested this out just yet though, but if I've seen some more footage of it, then I fully appreciate with this change. So, anyway though, so there's also another thing I want to mention about this, is that in regards to the forms of, as I said before, that when it comes to Epic Mickey Rebrushed, that not only we're about to be going to be releasing on the Switch, which that was the version I'm about to go after, once that particular game comes out, as it turns out, it's also going to be releasing on not only on PlayStation 4, but also on PlayStation 5, Xbox One, Xbox Series X, and PC. So yeah, that seems interesting, especially concerning after the events of Epic Mickey 2, The Power of Two, managed to came out on multitude of platforms ranging from Nintendo Wii, Nintendo Wii U, PlayStation 3, Xbox 360, and PC, and heck, even with the PlayStation Vita. So yeah, that seems kind of odd choice to able to actually release the game on that particular handheld, despite the fact that you can play the game on the go, despite the fact that it does have a lot of frame rate issues from time to time. And from what I've heard, that the PlayStation Vita version is considered to be the worst version of the game, because obviously with not only with lower frame rate, but it's also about the fact that it has a lot of technical issues, which also applies for the PC version as well, for Epic Mickey 2, The Power of Two in mind. Likely, for instance, with the forms of, there's no way you can able to experience co-op on the PC version, which I found was a little bit of a massive step backwards. So, relatively speaking, I just have no idea that was just a missed opportunity right there. So, either way. So, yeah, with that being said though, is about the fact that there's also short things worth noting for, about the fact that it looks like until 2 months time, that the UK channel called BBC Two, basically, BBC Two is eventually going to became 60 years old until in April sometime. So maybe it's a possibility that they might able to actually see the 60th anniversary items at some point. Well, I have no idea why I'm questioning that. Well, that's just mainly because to me though, I found the actual BBC Two items back in the day, found it a little bit more fascinating, especially with the forms of how personalities came in and all that stuff. So either way, let's just go ahead and grab the hold of a key, and once again we'll just have to able to go for this little door. But either way, there's also another thing I want to mention about this as well, that Maxi did technically already mention about the forms of a brand new Super Monkey Ball game has recently announced, ever since Ingenuity Forms have been a partner showcase after all, and that game in questioning is the Super Monkey Ball Banana Rumble. And still, it's very weird about the fact that every time when a new Super Monkey Ball game decides to release, it always includes banana word on there, which I'm not exactly sure why that's the case, but either way. And as far as whenever I looked at the forms of the gameplay footage, not just the gameplay footage, but also the entire description of that particular upcoming game, and as it turns out, it's not going to be on PlayStation consoles or Xbox systems, so instead it's only exclusive to the Nintendo Switch, which I guess that's a good thing, I guess, especially concerning for the fact that at this point in time, I might decide able to take a break on buying multiple versions of the exact same game for a while, until Sonic Cross Shadow Generations is about to be releasing. And in fact, speaking of which though, when it comes to 3 other games in general, both Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door Remake and Shadow Cross Shadow Generations, and finally, most notably, Epic Mickey Rebrushed, that we have no idea when these games are about to be releasing at some point, because as far as I'm aware, well, technically that Sonic Cross Shadow Generations is already going to be confirmed, is going to be releasing at some time in autumn season, but we're not exactly sure when exactly though, when it comes to autumn season of months. So it could either be September, October, or November. Well, we shall see. But either way, what I've noticed with the forms of how the factor with Super Monkey Ball Banana Rumble, it does allows us to able to go and participate with it not only in online multiplayer for up to 16 players, for let's just say you can only experience that when it comes to experiencing some activities from here and there, ranging from race, robot attack, and vice versa. And for that particular visual style, alongside with the forms of the online multiplayer aspect, it does kind of reminds me of the forms of Fall Guys vibe. Like, why there are some other games that are so obsessed with the forms of the exact same gameplay style as Fall Guys. Like, first Kirby did that for the likes of Dream Buffet, and now we're able to experience one of those games from Super Monkey Ball Banana Rumble. So, still, pretty strange, but hey, at least I don't mind about it too much. Although, despite the fact that some people complain that the visual style looks a bit weird, especially, again, it might take a bit of some time to get used to, especially that I have no idea, but for some reason I'm pretty much used to with the forms of the previous, modern, art style, you know, with the forms of that particular brown eyes for II and all that stuff. Well, that's the only thing I was pretty much accustomed to, but eventually, once that game decides to release until on 25th of June, obviously we'll try to get used to it. So, and I think, relatively speaking, I think that pretty much takes care of the forms of the majority of the forms of some third-party titles for coming onto the first half of 2024. Well, for the majority of the Nintendo Switch lineup. So all we need left now is just the last few bits of some upcoming Switch games just before Nintendo Switch 2 is approaching. So, but then again, I will say that 2024 is going to be likely a video game drought at this point for 2024. I think that's my only main gripe I have with this year so far, especially concerning for the fact that my expectations might be a little bit higher for able to experience some good old classic games again, but this time you can play those classic games on the go, ranging from, you know what I'm saying, with Mario vs. Donkey Kong right here, as well as the forms of Luigi's Mansion 2 HD. Oh yeah, that's another game it does needs to get ourselves the release date sorted. But then again, it did classify for mentioning sometime in summer. It could be either be roughly around after Super Monkey Ball Banana Rumble is going to be releasing. I'm not exactly 100% sure. So, anyways, here we go with Donkey Kong right here in Donkey Kong Jungle Boss Fight. And this boss is really tricky for if you're trying to go after the gold star. Because if you get hit once, then obviously you're about to get screwed. But there is this useful feature that I fully appreciate about this, is that if you mess up in any of those boss fights as Donkey Kong, like for example, if I get screwed up right here, then obviously there's actually a retry function. Now, normally in a Game Boy Advance version, it was actually very punishing that if you dare reset the old run on the actual level, obviously your life will be taken. Thankfully, in the remake, though, the actual retry option does not punish you this time around, which also applies if you somehow select exit level, so I fully appreciate about the forms that they fixed that issue, because obviously, if they kept that issue, then obviously it makes the entire game a lot more difficult. Well, thankfully though, that's not seem to be the case, so... Again, I apologize for my commentary, because it's a little bit tongue-twisting the end, folks, but that's just mainly because that's as far as we've been able to talk about. Not just by the forms of some comparisons for the sake of the original Game Boy Advance version of Mario vs. Donkey Kong, but also with the forms of some other details that usually it obviously attempts to be the case, so... But there we go, third time lucky when it comes to able to get the perfect run of this particular boss fight, and as a result, Donkey Kong is going to walk to the other side, just like the forms of how it does in the original version. However, there's one little drawback with these boss fights though. Epically sucks. I mean, it's the worst thing ever. They don't have the special unique special images anymore. Basically, in the original Game Boy Advance version, if you beat Donkey Kong on certain boss fights, you get this very unique card for the sake of the forms of how the fact that you've beaten Donkey Kong in these boss fights. Well, that's not the case this time around in this remake, sadly, but oh well. Beggars can't be choosers, I guess, but either way. Now let's move on to the third world, which appears to be Fire Mountain. So with that being said, we got the endings of this point right here. So join me tomorrow for more of Let's Play of Mario vs. Donkey Kong for the Nintendo Switch remake. Is now we're going on to World 3, which is known as Fire Mountain. So, yeah. That should be pretty much, well, as far as I'm aware. So I'll see you guys until tomorrow. Later, fellas.